Here we go. There are two things that immediately turn me off on a new anime series. One is a overly generic power fantasy isekai series that doesn't really do too much unique. And two, lots of food eating and sweets and food reaction type of stuff. And so when I seen Sweet Reincarnation, obviously I wasn't feeling it too much. Truth be told, it's doing a lot better for me than I originally anticipated. Not so much focused on the sweets, even though he has to tell us every 2 seconds that he's going to make a land of sweets, and more focused on just kind of how screwed up the land is that he's actually living in. But yes, my thoughts on the first 3 episodes. This show is like already in 3 episodes. It caught me off guard. I'm like, wait, this show's gotten way ahead of me. But this is my thoughts on the first 3 episodes, so let's jump into it. Sweet Reincarnation opens up with a guy that is really into creating foods and sweets and stuff. He's at this big competition to make this gigantic confections, and he gets isekai'd. But no, not by Truck-kun, by gigantic Bird-kun. This big confections falls on top of him, and he dies. Well, he wakes up in another world, a fantasy world, full of magic and all this other kind of stuff, and he is raised by a man named Casserole Mortallin. Yes, his name's Casserole. Because, you know, when I have a son, I'm definitely going to call them Casserole. That seems to be the joke with this world itself, is it seems like a lot of people have names after food. Like, yes, our main character, when he's reincarnated into this world, he's this son that is eventually named Pastry. Yes, Pastry, because you call your kid Pastry. Which is seemingly fitting because he's obsessed with food, so I guess he's probably really cool with the idea of being called Pastry. But yes, when we open up in this new world, he is already 9 years old. It talks about the fact that his father actually helped cultivate this land. He spent an entire 20 years with the people that came with him there, and the people that were already there, and he cultivated this barren land and made it actually flourish. Additionally, his father's also a war hero. So, not only was he a military hero, he also managed to spend 20 years cultivating a land, and he's had 5 children. The youngest being 9. I don't know how old this dude is, but he looks pretty young. But somehow he managed to do a bunch of stuff that most people take an entire lifetime to do. Train, becomes super powerful, able to teleport, becomes a military war hero, has a bunch of kids, cultivates a land for 20 years. Moving on. But yes, he's a lord of this land. He's been raising Pastry so that he can be stronger. Kind of mentioned the fact that Pastry has been sort of telling his father and the people of this land different ways of actually cultivating the crops better, like sprinkling stuff over the crops to help them grow faster. But there is still one thing that is upsetting to Pastry. He's not able to make the sweets that he wants to make because they can't grow sugar here. But he's been buying his time, again, because eventually he will make a land of sweets. While his father wants him to eventually grow up to take over the land and raise an army, Pastry wants to make sweets. Well, unfortunately, he's not allowed to have this, as he's informed that this band of bandits is coming to his town. Pastry's already upset at the idea that not that people will get harmed, but that the crops will get messed up. Dude's got priorities. Well, his father, knowing that his son is really smart because he's thinking of all these crazy stuff that he again doesn't know that he's an isekai, decides to put him through this true sanctification. It's like this coming of age ceremony that most children do around the age of 14. He's going to have Pastry do it at the age of 9. He has full confidence in him. So he teleports him over to this church where he brings him in there and does the ceremony itself, which requires a person to basically be confined. And this is the only way to essentially awaken one's magic, is to put him through true isolation. So they bind him up, they cover his eyes, they feed him some sort of solution, and then they lock him up inside of a room for 2 whole days. And Pastry's fine with this because he's sitting there just thinking about all the things that he wants to make out of apples that he's seen earlier. Until eventually, his power awakens. And we don't get a sense of what that is quite yet, but we do get a brief glimpse of the Pope of that church pretty much going, ha ha ha, you can't keep my mouth shut. I'm gonna expose what your kid has. Because apparently what Pastry got is really special. So they bring all the villagers into their land, they locked it down, the bandits come, his father goes out to pretty much be a decoy. Pastry back here pretty much has the kids gather a bunch of rocks so they can chuck rocks at people. Because, you know, having children chuck rocks at the faces of people and kill them is probably a good thing to do. There's like a real big moral issue here that he just seems to not care about. But late in the battle, we get the reveal of what Pastry's able to do, what his unique ability is that he was gifted from this whole ceremony, is the ability to replicate. The way that he explains it is that it's only things that he has experienced or that he can see. He explains that he can only duplicate things that is countable or that he's interfaced with the original. And he used this during the fight in order to replicate the injuries of one person where his face got burnt, to use it on the bandit leader and all of his men. And so everybody's pretty much blinded and in pain. And later on when the bandit escapes, he replicates his father's teleport ability in order to save somebody. And of course, his father, knowing this, is like, don't ever tell anybody else about that, and don't use teleportation like that because you're gonna end up in a rock or the ground. And the third episode pretty much wraps up with them kind of insinuating that a nearby leader is the one that sent the bandits out there, and that's about it. And yes, that pastry is going to create a land of sweets. In case you forgot, pastry is going to create a land of sweets. So my thoughts on Sweet Reincarnation. So far, not so much focus on food, which is kind of surprising. Just the cover art and everything seems to indicate that this is going to be about a pastry chef reincarnated and just doing nothing but making pastries. It seems much more focused on the land itself and how the leaders of nearby governments are corrupt, and his rise in pretty much being the lordship of this land. His father has a lot of hope for his son because obviously he's really smart because of his previous knowledge, though most of that knowledge is around food. Now, as to why a pastry chef is so knowledgeable about crops doesn't make much sense, but maybe that's just more of a common knowledge thing. But I'm assuming at this point, since now their land is safe and a nearby governance is being grouchy and this Pope guy knows about his true power, they might have a moment to breathe, and we're going to see how Pastry at this point is going to be using his replicate ability to create foods, probably. I'm guessing he's going to just replicate a bunch of apples and then just find some sugar, replicate the sugar. My assumption is because he's able to replicate anything that is countable, means that he is able to essentially create any ingredient that he wants, thus he can create all the sweets and stuff that he wants. And that's going to be the big question mark, because again, my original coming into this show, I was assuming that was just going to be it. He's going to make a bunch of crazy foods that nobody here has ever tasted, and everybody's going to go, oh, that was sugoi, why? So on one end, I'm sort of surprised, because it doesn't seem like it wants to do that. It seems like it really wants to make a story about the lands and the leaderships. Which makes me think that it's not so much going to be about making food and people reacting to the food, but more about creating a land that will become the epicenter of sweets and foods. What better way to make your economy of your land insanely powerful than with money? And money comes from providing foods that people want and crave. And yes, you would assume that this world itself is very primitive when it comes to foods, especially sweets. And of course, that power and money will come with jealousy and people that want it. So you will have a lot of these siding nations that will want to come in and attack. So that's my assumption is where the direction this is going. And like I said before, that's sort of a surprise for me. That's something that is actually intriguing me. Despite the fact that a lot of them kind of fail to meet my expectations, I do like these stories about nation building. That's why I like Isekai Slime so much. That's why I liked High School Prodigies Have It Easy in Another World. It had that same concept of we're here now. We see that they're having issues, let's build them up and show them modern niceties that will help improve their lives and bring in money, and that will help them flourish more. It's taking the usual food reactions and turning it to so much more. So I'm actually enjoying it. Now, unfortunately, the show doesn't look good. It's serviceable. The action does fine because it's just mostly stills rather than using CGI, which I actually appreciate. But most of the shots of the characters, side shots and everything just look really off. They can't keep a character on model for the life of them. Which honestly, it being Synergy SP, that doesn't shock me too much. It's not a grand studio. They're kind of a studio that keeps things right about the middle point. Not too bad, but not great. I do appreciate the way they've kind of built up Pastry in this other world as well. It sort of has this great atmosphere of, yes, technically a lot of people really do look up to Casserole. They have, of course, high expectations for Pastry. Pastry is technically using his knowledge to make him a little more mature in front of other people and utilizing strategy that a lot of people end up following. He's able to lead because he has knowledge, he's proven himself, and he has a father that a lot of people respect. So I do kind of like where they've kind of placed him as a character and how, yes, he even has underlings underneath him, young kids that are all looking to him as their lieutenants or whatever. But anyhow, like I said, I came into it with zero expectations. I assumed I was going to hate this show because of food stuff, but it surprised me. It doesn't look great, it's not doing anything incredible, but at least it's serviceable in the aspect that it's got this kind of possible nation building aspect that I always enjoy. But we'll see where it goes from here. But that's my thoughts on Sweet Reincarnation. The only thing that's truly unbearable is I really don't like Pastry and how obsessed he is with talking about how he's going to make a land of sweets. I don't need to hear about that every 2 minutes. But I hope you guys enjoy this impressions. If you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, Let me know what's thought of this series so far if you're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new to this channel, make sure that subscribe button so you got my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, I'll be doing first impressions of all the shows of the season. Also, if you want to support this content more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, and membership button down below. I greatly appreciate what it does, and y'all take care.